On the final day of the trial between Billy Mitchell and Karl Jobst, the focus shifted entirely to closing arguments, with all witnesses having been called and evidence submitted. The day centered around the exchanges between the judge, KB, and BB, as they referenced key pieces of testimony and evidence from earlier proceedings. This stage aimed to clarify and emphasize their interpretations of the facts, making their final case to the discussion centered on the nature of Billy's claims. While Billy mentioned lost work opportunities and emotional distress, KB emphasized that no formal claim for financial loss had been made in the pleadings. He argued that the case rested mainly on claims of reputational damage rather than economic harm. The judge noted that despite the absence of a formal economic claim, testimonies about lost job offers could still support the narrative of damage to Billy's reputation, depending on the credibility of the evidence. KB noted that Jace Hall, expected as a witness, was unable to testify. Instead, Charlie, Moist CR1 TCal, was called in his place. KB submitted an explanation for Jace's absence, arguing that without it, a negative inference could be drawn. BB did not contest this, and the judge indicated that Jace's absence would not be considered negatively. The substitution of Charlie for Jace altered the final narrative presented, as Charlie's testimony differed from what Jace might have provided. KB also focused on inconsistencies in Billy's statements about his appearances at events. Although Billy claimed he was not paid for some appearances, KB produced an invoice that contradicted his account. This discrepancy was presented to challenge Billy's credibility. Additionally, KB objected to the use of a Guinness video in BB's arguments, as it had not been entered into evidence. The judge noted that objections should have been raised earlier if there was an issue with referencing the video. These discussions, alongside the arguments over Apollo Legends' settlement agreement and non-disparagement clause, shaped the final deliberations, setting the stage for the judge's decision. During the closing arguments, KB made a critical mistake while addressing the timeline of events related to Karl's removal and republication of statements in his video. The judge sought clarification on when Karl had removed the statements, citing a sequence where Karl took the statements down, put them back up, and then took them down again. The confusion arose when the judge noted that Karl put the words back up after receiving information from Apollo Legends' brother that contradicted his initial claims. Rather than correcting the judge, KB agreed with the mistaken sequence, implying that Karl had republished the statements after learning they were potentially false, which painted Karl in a negative light regarding his intentions. The judge emphasized the inconsistency between Karl's actions and his stated willingness to amend the video if proven wrong, noting that Karl had three sources, Keemstar, Apollo's brother, and Billy's lawyers, suggesting the statements were false, yet the video was republished. This misrepresentation of the timeline suggested that Karl may have acted in bad faith, which could affect considerations of aggravated damages. KB, instead of correcting the record, doubled down, agreeing that Karl's actions were only partly inconsistent with his statements to Keemstar. The judge sharply disagreed, stressing that the actions were entirely inconsistent with Karl's claims. As KB moved forward, he failed to address this misstep, leaving a significant gap in the defense's narrative. The mistake became even more glaring as the judge pressed on the implications of this timeline error, questioning Karl's credibility and good faith in handling the video's content. While the judge's role is to scrutinize both sides, he seemed particularly focused on whether Karl's actions aligned with his statements, which could heavily influence the final judgment on damages. KB's failure to correct the record allowed this flawed narrative to persist, which painted Karl as deliberately maintaining false information. Beyond the timeline issue, KB also faced challenges in defending Karl's position regarding the public's interpretation of the video and the comments it generated. He argued that the comments on Karl's video couldn't serve as evidence of reputational harm if they did not specifically reflect the viewpoints of those who had watched the entire video. The judge responded that the broader interpretation of Karl's statements by the public, even if based on partial viewing or secondary comments, could still matter. This disagreement highlighted the challenge in proving that the impact of Karl's video was limited to the gaming community rather than affecting Billy's reputation in society more broadly. The judge further scrutinized KB's argument that Billy's claims of reputational damage lacked substance, noting the absence of a financial loss claim while pointing out that a decrease in invitations to events could still signify damage to reputation. KB attempted to counter by emphasizing testimonies that suggested Billy continued to be invited to and attended events. even if the number of invitations had decreased. He argued that this did not align with Billy's claims of being shunned or avoided, suggesting that Billy's general reputation had not significantly changed. Despite these efforts, KB's argument seemed weakened by the earlier timeline error, as it remained uncorrected throughout his presentation. This error, combined with the challenge of differentiating between reputational harm in the gaming sector and general societal perception, left gaps in Karl's defense. While KB highlighted that Billy's reputation among some event organizers and his close associates remained positive, the overarching narrative of the closing arguments pointed to inconsistencies in Karl's handling of the video and how the judge might interpret those actions when determining the outcome. KB focused on the contextual truth argument, specifically addressing what he called the fourth alternative imputation, the claim that Billy callously expressed joy over rumors of Apollo's death. KB argued that this imputation was substantially true, pointing to text messages sent by Billy. These messages, according to KB, went beyond facetious comments or dark humor. Instead, KB suggested that they demonstrated genuine indifference to Apollo's death. KB noted that this aspect was critical because, in his view, it was the most damaging imputation against Billy. The judge identified the relevant section of the pleadings, and KB highlighted the specific text exchanges between Billy and others, such as Jace and Carlos. KB read from Billy's messages, which included lines like, "If it is true, I will not shed a tear. I will try not to smile or giggle. No promises." KB argued that this did not appear to be humor or a lighthearted comment, but rather an expression that lacked empathy. Although BB's side claimed Billy was being facetious, KB countered that the exchanges spanned more than one message and were consistent in tone. He also highlighted contradictions in Billy's explanation and the testimonies that attempted to downplay the gravity of these comments. KB further noted that Billy's remarks were not made in isolation. He pointed to Billy's involvement in the search for further evidence of Apollo's death and emphasized the phrase, "no joke," which KB argued would not be used as part of a joke. Even when considering Carlos's testimony, which suggested that Billy's remarks might have been in jest, KB maintained that the overall context indicated otherwise. The judge questioned whether aspects like a joke about death by spider might indicate humor, but KB argued that even if that part was a joke, the rest of the messages showed a lack of seriousness about Apollo's fate. KB then made a broader argument about the potential implications of this imputation, asserting that the accusation of taking joy in someone's death was more severe than other claims of defamation. He argued that while contributing to someone's distress leading to suicide could be seen as unintentional, taking joy in the event would suggest malice and deliberate indifference. According to KB, this imputation, if seen as true, would act as a defense against Billy's defamation claims, suggesting that it outweighed other accusations due to its particularly egregious nature. As KB continued, he referenced relevant case law to support his position, arguing that when a plaintiff claims defamation but is also faced with a true but more damaging statement, that truth can undermine their claims. He suggested that even if the judge found other aspects of Karl's actions to be in error, this particular issue would serve as a strong defense. KB maintained that the expression of joy in response to someone's death would be seen as an evil act, more damaging than any other aspect of the case. He compared it to the seriousness of accusations like being called a pedophile, but emphasized that the implication of celebrating a death was particularly severe. Finally, KB addressed potential implications for damages, noting that even if the judge found against Karl on other points, the nature of this imputation could influence the outcome. He referred to a recent decision, Harrington v. Shord, where accusations of a severe nature led to relatively modest damage. KB argued that the circumstances in Billy's case did not warrant the high level of damages being claimed, as Billy continued to have public visibility and was not shunned in the same way as plaintiffs in those other cases. He emphasized that without a claim for economic loss, and given the nature of the text exchanges, the damages should be limited even if some defamation claims were upheld. As KB wrapped up his arguments, Judge reminded him to address the issue of mitigation, which KB initially referred back to his written submission but chose to elaborate on. He emphasized two key points: the limited time the contested words were online and the presence of Karl's apology video. KB observed that Judge seemed skeptical about the effectiveness of the apology, a point the judge confirmed, emphasizing that Karl's retraction video did not clearly indicate to viewers that it contained information relevant to Billy, Apollo, or the cheating allegations. Judge pointed out that Unlike Carl's other videos featuring Billy prominently, this one focused on a different topic and lacked any indication that it addressed the earlier controversy, making it less likely to reach the intended audience. KB argued that the video still reached Carl's subscribers, thus including those who might have seen the original video, due to the algorithm pushing content to those subscribers. However, Judge countered that unless viewers were specifically interested in speedrunning, they might ignore a video that didn't appear relevant to Billy's situation. Judge questioned how the retraction, buried at the end of a different video, could be considered a genuine attempt to correct the record. KB acknowledged that the title and thumbnail of the video did not mention Billy, but maintained that the video's reach to millions of subscribers should still be seen as an effort to mitigate the harm caused. Trying to shift focus, KB pointed out that Billy himself did not use his own platform to publicize the correction. He argued that Billy's choice to keep the contested words visible on his own YouTube channel prolonged any harm, as those words remained accessible to viewers. KB emphasized that portions of Karl's video, such as those clarifying that Karl was not calling Billy a murderer, were still available, while Billy chose to highlight only the contentious segments. KB argued that this decision by Billy could have contributed to extending any reputational damage caused by the initial statements. The discussion then turned to the interpretation of Karl's statement about Apollo's death. Judge challenged KB's interpretation that the phrasing did not directly link Billy's actions to Apollo's death, questioning whether the statement could be read in only one way. KB responded that while the judge's reading was possible, the statement also contained further references to Apollo's deteriorating health, which provided additional context. KB read aloud from the statement. He was extremely ill and couldn't handle the ongoing stress. KB argued that this language suggested Apollo's health issues played a major role in his decision, rather than attributing it solely to Billy's actions. Judge also questioned KB about the allegations related to Twin Galaxies and Karl's statement that Billy had planned to produce a fraudulent Donkey Kong tape. Judge asked for evidence supporting this claim, which appeared in Karl's video. KB referenced a recorded phone call transcript in which Billy discussed certain strategies related to the controversy. KB argued that this evidence could be interpreted to support Karl's statements about Billy's intentions, even though it might not be central to their defense. Judge remained uncertain whether the evidence fully backed the claim, but acknowledged that the transcript provided some basis for Karl's narrative. The judge and KB then discussed references to TG's published statement on Billy's alleged cheating, with the judge questioning whether this statement was formally entered into evidence. KB eventually identified the statement within the trial bundle and pointed out that it had been discussed during Billy's testimony. Judge remained cautious, noting that much of the information about the TG statement had come through hearsay rather than direct evidence. Nevertheless, KB argued that the context of the discussion in court supported the defense's broader argument regarding Billy's reputation and the allegations of cheating, which Karl's video aimed to address. Following an intermission, KB addressed the earlier timeline mistake regarding the sequence of events leading to the removal and re-upload of Karl's video. He clarified that Karl initially took the video down after receiving a concerns notice, but the decision to remove it permanently came after contact from Apollo's brother. KB cited transcript evidence to support this correction, emphasizing that this clarification was important given the judge's interest in the timeline. The correction was recorded, and KB concluded his arguments. BB then began his presentation, outlining his approach to address both general matters and specific points from KB's submission. He focused first on the issue of missing testimony from Evelyn Mitchell, arguing that it wasn't necessary for Billy's side to directly address why she was not called as a witness. However, Judge countered that it was indeed Billy's responsibility to explain her absence, given that she could have provided crucial testimony on matters like Billy's social media management and finances. Judge suggested that the lack of explanation could potentially lead to a negative inference about her absence. BB moved on to discuss Billy's credibility, asserting that Billy's testimony was respectful and compelling, especially when describing the impact of Karl's video. He pointed out that Billy's testimony was consistent with that of other witnesses, such as Junior, who described hearing their father's distress, and Triforce and Walter Day, who recounted Billy's anger. BB highlighted that Billy could recall details like dates of events and his high scores dating back to 1982 without relying on documents, and noted that Billy's claims about his appearances before and after Karl's video were supported by Junior's testimony. BB addressed the number of appearances, stating that Billy had 20 to 25 paid appearances per year before Karl's video, but only about 15 over 3 years afterward, mixing paid and unpaid events. BB argued that this significant drop demonstrated the impact of Karl's video on Billy's reputation and opportunities. BB then addressed the credibility of Karl's witnesses, arguing that many of them had axes to grind with Billy or had faced legal action from him, affecting their impartiality. He contrasted this with Billy's witnesses, whom he claimed had direct knowledge of Billy's reputation and interactions. BB emphasized that Karl's witnesses primarily formed their views based on online content rather than firsthand experiences with Billy, raising questions about the reliability of their testimony. Regarding the issue of publication, BB argued that the video was published in legal terms, referencing testimony from Steve Grunberger, who viewed the video in Queensland, and Billy Jr., who also watched it. BB maintained that the video's wide reach, both in Australia and globally, should be considered when assessing damages. Judge questioned the technical interpretation of downloading videos from YouTube, suggesting that watching a video may not involve a traditional download. BB referenced language from a high court decision suggesting that the digital transmission of a video to a viewer's device constitutes a form of downloading, likening it to receiving a newspaper or a television broadcast. BB then turned to Billy's deposition in the Twin Galaxies litigation, explaining that discrepancies between Billy's testimony in the TG case and this case were due to differences in defamation laws and the specific focus of each case. BB argued that Billy's statements in the TG case referred specifically to the impact of allegations of cheating, not the impact of Karl's video concerning Apollo. Judge noted that Billy's explanation of his TG deposition answers was given during the current case, but the full context of those earlier questions was not in evidence, leaving some ambiguity about the framing of those responses. BB concluded by reiterating that Karl's video had a significant negative impact on Billy's public reputation and opportunities. He emphasized that the reduction in paid appearances after the video's publication and the global dissemination of the video contributed to the damage Billy had suffered. BB referenced the 2022 Barilaro, Shanks, Markovina, and Google case, where a YouTuber called Friendly Jordies made videos accusing politician John Barilaro of corruption, leading to a defamation lawsuit. BB used this case to highlight the importance of video viewership and the failure to produce YouTube analytics, arguing that Karl's side similarly did not disclose viewer retention data. He pointed to Karl's testimony about the placement of his correction at the end of a video, which Karl justified based on how YouTube promotes longer videos through watch time and click-through rates, despite not providing specific analytics. BB challenged KB's method of dissecting Karl's words in detail, citing the case Favell v. Queensland Newspapers, which emphasized considering the overall impression of a publication rather than analyzing each word. BB argued that YouTube videos should be treated like newspaper articles, in that the initial impression matters most, not a detailed analysis. He also touched on the Brose v. Beluskas case, arguing that context matters in determining defamation on social media, but he suggested that legal perspectives have evolved since that 2020 case, with courts now more attentive to the role of platforms like YouTube in regulating content. Judge questioned this claim, pointing out the lack of regulation in the comments and videos presented in this case. BB then returned to the Barilaro case, drawing parallels between Karl's video and the controversial content from Friendly Jordies. He argued that even though such videos might be labeled as parody or entertainment, they can still have a significant impact on a person's reputation and should not be dismissed as mere satire. BB suggested that the Barilaro decision showed courts taking these matters seriously, despite being in an unregulated online space, contrasting with KB's position that the video's context should lessen their defamatory potential. BB moved on to address the topic of reputation, challenging KB's assertion that Karl's video did not harm Billy's standing further. He argued that KB's position rested on the claim that Billy already had a poor reputation, suggesting without proof of a pre-existing bad reputation, this line of argument should be dismissed. BB highlighted the damage Karl's video caused to Billy's reputation, pointing to Junior's testimony about the decline in Billy's event appearances as evidence. BB then addressed Billy's reputation from King of Kong, arguing that the movie's portrayal of Billy as a wrestling heel was understood by many to be a character act. He referenced the testimony that Billy's scowling or smiling at events was part of this persona, and Judge acknowledged the film's mixed reception. BB noted people understood this to be part of the Billy Mitchell character. He also suggested the film had been a net positive for Billy, as it increased his recognition. Regarding the Twin Galaxies dispute, BB argued that its impact on Billy's reputation was limited and temporary. He cited Billy's testimony that the TG dispute was initially harmful, but that he was able to counteract its effects, particularly through his engagement on Twitch and Guinness World Records' 2020 decision to reinstate his scores. Judge posed a hypothetical about reputation damage. If a person's reputation is evenly split between supporters and detractors, does a defamatory comment that doesn't shift that balance still constitute harm? BB countered that Karl's video had in fact pushed more people to view Billy negatively, suggesting the video had measurable effects on public opinion. BB then turned to the third imputation, claims about Billy's supposed plan to create a fraudulent Donkey Kong tape. He argued the defense had failed to substantiate this claim, referencing the phone call with David Race and Billy's testimony about his intentions. BB asserted, "It's just not true. They can't establish the substantial truth of that imputation." Addressing the allegations that Billy celebrated Apollo's death, BB focused on the context of Billy's texts. He pointed out that Billy had stated no joke, but clarified that this referred to the source of the rumor, not to Apollo's death itself. BB emphasized that the subsequent exchange with Carlos, which included remarks like, "If it is true, I will not shed a tear," should be seen as poorly judged humor rather than genuine malice. He contended, "It's certainly not my client's finest hour, but it doesn't prove the truth of an imputation that he expressed joy." Judge questioned the timing and tone of Billy's comments, noting that at the time of saying, "If it is true, I will not shed a tear," Billy did not yet know if the rumor was false. Judge summarized it as potentially implying, "It's maybe that he didn't think Apollo was dead, but if he is dead, hip hip hooray." BB insisted that the comments were made in a facetious context, arguing that the defense would need to prove Billy believed the rumor for their interpretation to hold. BB then briefly addressed the claim that Billy uses litigation to force others to recognize his achievements, maintaining that this allegation hadn't been proven true. Throughout, he stressed that Karl's video caused substantial reputational damage to Billy, arguing that the sting of the imputations outweighed any pre-existing public perception. BB turned to the topic of damages, drawing a contrast between this case and the Harrington case that KB cited. He argued that, unlike Harrington, where there was no evidence of distress or broader awareness of the defamatory statements, Billy's case involved substantial harm and public exposure. BB emphasized that Billy's suffering included physical symptoms like vomiting and sleeplessness and fears about the impact on his marriage. He contended that these factors distinguished Billy's claim and justified a higher damages award, even if the case did not reach the worst of cases threshold for maximum compensation. Judge countered that even in broader cases, damages often remained in the $100,000 range, questioning the justification for the $450,000 Billy sought. BB maintained that this case involved very serious harm. Judge probed further, asking how close to the maximum this case could come, noting that even for severe situations, it might not warrant approaching $400,000. BB reiterated that while the maximum might not apply, Billy's distress, the extent of publication, and the damage to his reputation were significant, pointing again to the serious nature of the allegations. BB then criticized KB's references to the Twin Galaxies proceedings, arguing that they were not part of the pleadings and should not influence the assessment of damages. He claimed that KB was attempting to improperly include these references to suggest that the TG dispute, not Karl's video, caused Billy's distress. Judge acknowledged that the references might be improperly integrated if not pleaded correctly. In discussing the grapevine effect, BB challenged KB's analysis of YouTube comments, contending that only a small percentage of comments referenced both cheat and Billy Mitchell, suggesting that the negative impact from the video was less direct than KB argued. BB also emphasized the persistent reposting of Karl's video by others, stressing the ongoing harm to Billy's reputation. He argued that the videos spread by third parties underscored the relevance of the grapevine effect, even years later. Turning back to malice, BB suggested that Karl's behavior, including his tweets and the number of subsequent videos on Billy, indicated a lack of good faith. He argued that this justified an award not just for the damages Billy suffered, but also as a means of vindicating Billy's reputation. Judge questioned BB on the specifics of the Twin Galaxies allegations, asking whether their statement about Billy using the wrong hardware for a Donkey Kong record wasn't essentially an accusation of deceit. BB suggested there was a distinction, arguing TG's statement did not explicitly assert Billy's intent to deceive. Judge and BB then discussed the nature of the alleged admissions by the defense. BB emphasized that their side was arguing the imputations were false, while Judge noted the defense's stance on not denying the falsehood of certain allegations if they were deemed to arise from Karl's video. After BB's lengthy address, KB offered a brief reply. He clarified points around reputation, noting that under the Perot case, a witness's understanding of Billy's reputation at various times, regardless of having seen the video, was relevant. He contended that this helped establish Billy's settled reputation before and after Karl's video, countering BB's claims of harm. KB also highlighted that Billy's deposition explanation came during re-examination after KB's opportunity to challenge it had ended. He emphasized that this timing meant Billy's unchallenged narrative should not necessarily be taken at face value. Judge thanked both parties, acknowledging the difficulty of the case, and noted that he would reserve his judgment without indicating a timeline, citing other pending judgments. With this, he formally adjourned the trial. A final summary may or may not be created to cover the judge's conclusion, as that will likely be covered by Karl on his channel. Thank you for following the proceedings of this case with these summaries, and if you enjoyed my coverage, please consider making a donation to Ursat's Cat's GoFundMe.